What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Adobe Live. I am here with the wonderful Lizzie Peirce. Say
Hello.
Lizzie.
Hi,
Hello,
guys.
welcome. Cool. So, as we always do, we have a little bit of housekeeping items to get through. So, before we get into Lizzie's introduction and who she is and everything that she does, I just want to call out the schedule real quick because we are the third show of the day, but I want to show you what else is in store. So as you can see, we had the getting started with Photoshop on iPad stream before us. Paul Traney just took us into the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge, and now we are live with photo editing. And here are all the rest of the shows that we have in store for today. So stick around. We have so much more content dealing with Illustrator, with branding and identity, XD, draw along and Photoshop, design offs, all very good stuff. All right, cool. So Lizzie, who are you? What do you do? Let us know.
Oh, man. So I wear a lot of hats. How I got started in photo and video and all that stuff was I obviously went to school for it, but I run a video production company here in Toronto, which is where I am right now, with my fiance, Chris Howe. And we've been doing that for, I don't even know, about 7 or 8 years now. And inevitably we got into the world of YouTube because the opportunity to make whatever we want was, incredible. And now we are working with different tourism boards and different brands, creating content with them. And we travel a ton. Obviously not right now because of the way that the world, the state of the world right now, but yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm super passionate about video and photography, but I'm very excited to be editing some photos with you guys live and showing you a little bit of my process and, a behind the scenes look at actually how I take these photos too. So yeah, that's
I
me.
love it. Can't wait. Speaking of video, we actually do have a video queued up on Lizzie's YouTube channel that we're going to show you all. Just get an idea of everything that she's done, what her background's been, and how she's gotten into where she is today. But before that, let's give the chat some love. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. We got Lindsay Palmer in the house. We have Cody Bear, Maya, Cheryl, Gus Martin, the one and only. We have Bruce. We have Sam Peterson, Ferry, Davika, Paloma. Yes, thank you all so much for joining us. Go ahead and let us know where you're tuning in from. I hosted the last 2 days, and it's just so great to see the global audience that we have. People tune in from all over the world. So let us know where you're tuning in from. Go ahead and drop some lines in the chat. And of course, just engage with us throughout the course of the day and even this show. This is a very safe space. This is going to be photography based. So if you have any questions with photography, with computers, with the type of specifications that you need, we're all here to learn and answer your questions. So please come in and join us and engage with us. All right, cool. So Lizzie, let's have a look at that really awesome intro video that you have on your YouTube channel. I actually just watched this before we went live. It is full of so much energy. It's awesome. So I'm gonna go ahead and play that. Join us and engage with us. All right, cool. So Lizzie, let's have a look at that really awesome. Hold on, we got a super meta audio because my audio is playing on the live stream that I'm looking at on the same computer. So I'm gonna have to cue that up one more time. Here we go. All right, here comes the video.
Who am I in 60 seconds? I'll show you. I'm Lizzie, a video producer, photographer, and professional salt and vinegar chip eater. Influencer. I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, where all the nice people live.
Sorry that you're sorry. Well, I'm sorry that you're sorry about me being sorry.
When I graduated university and started looking for work, over and over, people were telling me that I wasn't good enough, that I was too pretty to be smart. Backhanded compliment, am I right? But people who doubt me just fuel my fire. So I got a job, learned the ropes, quit that job, almost threw up, and started a production company, and for 2 years did awesome work, but I wanted more. So I started uploading my own videos online. Being a creator isn't about followers or money. It's about making art that inspires. It's about encouraging people to start their own creative business. It's about being a female in a male-dominated field and putting myself out there so that people, especially young women, can point at me through a screen and say, I can do it because she is doing it. No one else's opinion of you defines you. That's why I'm a creator.
That is an awesome video. It's so
Thank
much
you.
full of energy, so inspirational. And fun fact, Lizzie did that whole video herself. She's also an editor,
Yes.
so that came out so, so good.
I did that whole video in like 3 days, I think, because actually I always had a backup plan where it would be my channel intro video, but originally it was for, I think I was applying for the Sony Alpha Female Creator group. And so I made that video as part of my submission. And so there was a deadline. So that's all I did for 3 days was like eat, sleep, and breathe that video.
Yeah, it came out great. I mean, a lot of
Thanks.
effort, a lot of time put into it. Awesome
Yeah.
result. One more thing to show is, of course, Lizzie's Instagram. So here it is. If you don't follow her already, please do. It's at Lizzie Peirce. She's got all this amazing photo, video, content. Go ahead and give her a follow. You can see all her good stuff right here.
Oh, thank you.
Of course. All right. Well, without further ado, let's get into Lightroom and do some photo editing. So
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and flip over to your screen, Lizzie. Boom.
All right. Welcome to my screen, everyone. I've prepared some photos for all of us to edit. Hopefully we get through all of them, but I wanted to make sure we had more than enough and a good variety for you guys. So we've got a few different kinds of travel photography. Again, these are not edited. That's what we're doing today. Yeah, so I'll just click through so you guys can see them all. Obviously, this needs to be cropped. We did some panoramas with the drone. We've got some travel stuff, some portraits. And then if you guys are interested, you can let us know in the chat. I took this the other day. A friend of mine has a business in Toronto. And so I was doing essentially some real estate photos. It's not my typical thing, but if you guys are interested in seeing how, so this is raw right now, how to edit those, if that's something you're looking into work-wise, I'm happy to show you guys the process on those. I thought that might be an interesting little add-on. So let us know in the chat. But yeah, I'll pick one of these and we can get started.
Sweet. And I'm looking back at the chat and I'm just seeing all the comments coming in from that video. We have, oh dang, Sarah saying amazing. Maribella saying yes, one of the best creators. Steve is saying
you guys
excellent.
are so nice.
Yeah, of course we have all those fire emojis. This is
Love
great.
the
And we have
fire
some
emojis.
people calling out where they're coming in from. So we got Rachel Lee from Knoxville, Tennessee. We have Jose from Los Cabos, Mexico. Yeah, cool. And then Steve is
Sweet.
saying, what? No hot dog or ketchup chips? Ketchup chips. I feel like
Oh,
you either
gosh.
really like that or you don't. You either like
I
team
love-
ketchup on chips.
Oh, I love ketchup chips.
man.
I'm a huge chip person. It's like my favorite food, but you know, I gained, like everyone else did, I gained the COVID-20, you know, we were stuck at home, all we were doing was eating. So I'm working that off now. No chips for me. No ketchup chips. So what I normally start with, I mean, we won't do this today, but I have my kind of presets over here and I actually do like a few of them. So normally that's where I would start and I'll do some tweaks. Maybe I can do that on a later photo, but why don't we start this one from scratch just for the fun of it?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So first thing I'll do is fix the crop. So you can see I tried my best to center this, but it's a very, you can tell it's the kind of photo where it's really important for it to be symmetrical, and seeing it a little bit off is not what we want. So we're going to go ahead and crop that in just a touch.
Cool. And Lizzie, while we're just fresh editing, I know we're going to get this question at some point in the chat. These two questions
Yeah.
always come up. Number one, what camera did you shoot this with? What's your camera that you usually shoot with? And also,
Yeah.
what are you using to edit these photos?
So this was shot with the A7 III. So we do have enough room with the amount of megapixels it has to crop in a little bit. So that's what we want. And I'm editing on a PC, actually. I'm editing on the HP Envy 15. I just got this computer recently and it's been awesome to have. I love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Especially because the screen actually has something called the 4K OLED display, and it has a Delta E color accuracy. So basically, like when we're talking about photo editing, what that basically means is it's as true to the human eye as we can get with color, which is what we want. We never want to take it over to a different screen or print it out and then find, oh, the colors are completely different. So we want a screen that's color accurate for sure.
Yeah, I actually have this laptop in front of me as well, and that screen is bonkers. It looks so good. 4K,
and it's
super crisp.
touchscreen, which is kind of cool. Obviously, you guys can't see the benefit of that on your end, but it is touchscreen. I forget that all the time.
That's awesome. All right, we have a couple more people tuning in saying where they're coming in from. We have Carlos from Lima. We have Brian from Scotland. Yes, we're keeping the theme of a global audience going. I love it. I love seeing where everybody's tuning in from. So thank you. Howard Pinsky is saying, I love Sony mirrorless cameras. Yes, I think Howard is also an avid Sony alpha shooter. So welcome as well, Howard. Good to see you in the chat.
Nice. And in case anyone is wondering, I did pre-order the A7S III. Very excited about that.
Ooh, that's
waiting patiently.
I'm on the fence about that one. I've been a Canon fanboy for a while, and their R series was kind of the cameras that I've been waiting for. You know, I feel like they were lacking a little bit in like that hybrid design. But then the Sony A7S III came out, and I'm seeing all those tech specs, and I'm just like, man, this is a hard decision.
I don't know. If it depends, it really depends what you're doing.
Yeah, that's definitely a video-centric camera, the Sony A7S III.
Exactly. And I think if the photos you are taking in terms of the R5, if the photos you are taking are only going up on Insta or they are only going to be thumbnails, then the R5 is fine. If you can get past the overheating, maybe you're fine with that, you know?
Yep. I have heard about that.
Just in case anyone was wondering what I did up here. So sometimes when I start out an edit, I'll actually hold down Shift. And if you double click on the word exposure or highlights or shadows, Lightroom will actually give you its best guess, I guess you could say, at what it should be set at. And sometimes I like to start there, and then, I mean, editing is really going by feel at that point. If I think, oh, say we brought the shadows back to 0 here. If I hold down Shift and I double click on shadows, it brings up much more of the shadows, but I don't actually like that. It's a bit too bright, so I'll actually back them up a bit because I want it to look a little moody and dramatic.
That's a really cool tip. Yeah, there's with these Adobe apps, just so many ways of doing one thing. I usually just hit auto and then adjust accordingly, but I actually didn't know that you can hold Shift and click the word, and then it will give you like just its auto settings for that slider. So it's a really cool tip.
Yeah, it's fun. It's sometimes a nice place to start when you're staring at your photo and like, oh God, where do I want to go with this? Especially if you're not starting with the preset. Sometimes your photo already looks good as is, and I think this one already looks pretty good, but we're just trying to create a look. You know, we're trying to create a mood. So this has kind of been my standard in terms of the present section down here. So I'll bring up the texture a little bit. And it's funny, a couple years ago, I was all for that clarity, and now I back it up a little bit, usually around -10. I don't know.
I kind of had the same route. I was all about clarity, and now I see myself actually taking that slider left.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. It's the mood. It just makes everything look a little soft and beautiful. So
we had a question in the chat, Lizzie, saying which HP computer was that? Or which model?
The HP NV15.
Cool.
So it's a PC.
All right, and while we're in the chat, I have a couple more people tuning in from where they are. We have Angelo from Colombia. We have Matthias from Germany. We have Mirabella from Calgary. And yeah, this is awesome. We do have a question from Marsha. Does Shift work on Mac? I would imagine so. I think it does.
Yeah, it should be the same.
Translate on both operating systems.
Yeah. Shift is the same, and right now you can see that when I'm dragging these sliders around, you probably notice that it's really hard to tell sometimes on the full photo without looking at this teeny little box down here what these are actually doing. So what I like to do is hold down Alt, and you'll see that makes your photo black and white. Just gives you a a better understanding of how the sharpening is actually affecting the photo. And normally I'll make kind of a little step ladder with the amount, the radius, and the detail, so it looks like a little diagonal line.
Sweet.
My rule of thumb. Sometimes I like to add a little bit of luminance too, just for fun. Just smooths everything out. If there's any little some noise or any graying, it just kind of smooths that out. But I'm curious to know if you guys if there's anything I'm going through that you're wondering and I forget to talk about it, what effect it's having on the photo. Don't be afraid to ask in the comments, or I mean, this is the order I usually go in, but sometimes I jump around. I don't really have a strict recipe in, you know, whether I start kind of in this panel up here, or whether then I go all the way over to the HSL panel. You know, it varies depending on the photo, but usually if I'm trying to narrow down a process, this is what I would do most of the time.
So just to recap, when you first start editing the photos, you usually go with those global adjustments and work from top down.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
We have a question from Carlos. Every time I see more lives editing from PC and not Mac, any reason? I don't think there's any reason, Carlos. I think it's just personal preference, whether people are using Mac or PC. So they both do editing with the Adobe apps really, really well. So I think it just comes down to personal preference and what you prefer.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, PCs are definitely at a affordable price point for everyone these days. So it makes a difference depending on what you end up picking up.
You got to look at your budget too. I mean, not everybody can spend all that money to get the fancy latest gear. So there's a lot of affordable options out there. I think PC is usually on that front where it's a little more affordable.
And I think a lot of people, you know, when they're thinking about switching to PC, they're always kind of like, but what do I, you know, I'm so invested in a different ecosystem, or, you know, what about AirDrop or something like that? Well, the HP actually has an equivalent. It has Quick Drop. So you can just pull up that application and you can, you download the app on your phone and you can send whatever file or link or whatever it is right to your phone seamlessly.
That's a big one.
It's, yeah, so it's
super convenient,
not
just being able to hand it off like that.
Totally.
So we have a question from the chat. If you're going to apply a LUT, when do you normally do that?
I would apply, I'm assuming they're talking about a preset rather than,
yeah. I think LUT is usually more used for video terms.
Video, yeah,
but
exactly.
The equivalent to that would be a preset.
Normally I would do that at the beginning. If there was anything I was adjusting before I apply that LUT, it would be just making sure that my white balance was set correctly. So if for some reason it looks a little funky, here, like if we pull over, let's just take a look at this, for example. So this is obviously set to as shot. If I select auto, it just warmed up the image a little bit. So that will have an effect on the preset. Most presets, they shouldn't have the white balance set. It should be, you know, you should have your white balance set on the photo, not in the preset. So you can see that there's a difference there. But I actually prefer, I think, the way that this photo was shot as is. But sometimes if your white balance wasn't set correctly, then you would want to change that before. But then I would apply the preset, and then I would make any adjustments afterwards. And normally the first thing I would, I'll show you guys as I go along, but the next thing I would probably adjust after applying the LUT would be the exposure, because that also has a huge effect on the look of the photo and how that LUT, I keep saying LUT now, how the preset affects the photo.
Awesome. One more question from the chat. Do you use the transform panel to straighten the photo? I think you just went over this at the very beginning.
So you would go, what is this one actually? No, the crop area. So you would kind of click the crop overlay. And if I wanted to straighten the photo, I would normally, I mean, you could either do it with this little slider, hit auto. Sometimes I don't find that super reliable. But my personal favorite would be if you click this little ruler and you can take, you know, whatever straight edge you have in the photo. This one is level as is, but I did purposely pick one later on that isn't level. So we'll go over this again later, but you can, actually, I didn't do a great job there. So I'll try and pick as close to that corner as I can, and then match the level. And there's nothing to fix, so it wasn't really crooked to begin with, but
yeah, it's already pretty straight shot.
Yeah,
so,
but
yeah,
if I made
that's a great tool.
Yeah,
I
that's
use that
pretty
one a
much
lot.
what I'm using.
And something I learned actually by watching these live streams as well is if you have a tree, you can actually, instead of matching it up horizontally, you can actually go vertically as well, and then it'll level it up.
Yeah, exactly.
So, that was a cool tip.
In any direction.
Well, we got a lot of questions coming in, Lizzie, so get ready. So yes, thank you for asking all these questions. These are great.
This is testing my multitasking.
I noticed that you're using Lightroom Classic. Is there a difference between Lightroom and Lightroom Classic?
I'm normally working in Lightroom Classic. I haven't really worked. I mean, I'm always kind of in Lightroom Classic. So I haven't really worked in the other Lightroom, but I believe that there are more, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there are just more options. Like this is more of a desktop version.
Yeah. So I think with Lightroom Mobile, it's more catered towards the mobile experience. But Lightroom Classic has a little bit more sliders and adjustments to work with.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm gonna let you do some editing. Keep the questions coming. I'm gonna make a list of them and ask Lizzie as she goes on, but we'll let her get through some editing.
Yeah, we'll try. So I think I'm gonna go for, I was just deciding what direction I want to go with in this photo. So normally, I mean, if you like a really saturated look, you could, so I've desaturated the greens and the blues here, and I might actually bring the teals down a little bit because I want to go for a moodier look. So, I mean, it depends how much, obviously that's quite a bit. If you're not sure where, this is actually a good tip. If you're not sure which slider, like these blues in the background, like I want to affect all these blues, let's just say, and I'm not sure whether that's going to be more in the aqua or the blue, you can actually click this little toggle right here and hover over whatever color in the image that you're hoping to adjust, and it lights up over on this side. It lights up over in the saturation panel or over that particular slider color to tell you which color that actually is. So it's mostly blue, as you can see. So me adjusting these aquas actually isn't really going to do anything. So you can actually see now it's mostly blues back here. So if you like the blue, you could leave the blue. I'm going to take some of it out. And now what I might do is I'm going to make a gradient over the sky, because I brought back some of that detail in with the highlight slider earlier, but now I want it to look like a really moody day. So I just drew in my gradient. And now let's just work with exposure. But right now it's cranking it up and I want it to be dark and moody.
Nice. It's making a big difference.
Now it looks like a stormy day. It just creates more of a vibe for the photo. I don't know how else to explain it really. It's always interesting when you have to explain your process in Lightroom. It's like, it just makes it look moody. It looks like a vibe, but why? That's up to you.
And if you hit, so this filter is great because it'll make you, or it'll allow you to do like localized custom adjustments. And if you hit O, it'll show you what area of the photo it's actually affecting. Yeah, so you can see in red, that's where the bulk of the effect is taking place, and it kind of tapers out as a gradient. So
exactly.
It's a really cool tool to use.
Exactly. And I mean, if you were looking to post this to Instagram, then you would use the 4x5, 8x10 crop. And I like the look of these little eye pieces. Does anyone remember what these things are called? I'm blanking on what they are. Like no, it's not binoculars, is it? Or maybe it. I don't know.
No, I think binoculars are handheld. I'm not sure what that kind of static piece is.
Well, I want it to be centered, so I'm going to center it in here and center it in the crop. And as you can see, like most of my gradients applied up here. So whether I want to change that actually to get more of an effect, you can actually just grab the toggle if you want. Instead of just pulling it down to the bottom, you can grab that whole toggle and drag it down a bit.
Nice.
And sometimes they'll bring up the contrast a bit, clarity. Getting moody.
It's getting very moody. I like it.
I'm so glad.
We're at it. We have a question from the chat. We're asking, what kind of computer specs do you look for a good editing system?
This is a good one. So a few things. And I mean, we can talk about this computer in particular. So I'll pause on editing for a bit so I can answer this question. It's going to require some brain power. So you definitely want a strong GPU. You want an ideal GPU, because if you're working in creative programs like Lightroom or Premiere Pro or Photoshop, especially in After Effects, you want to be able to see the adjustments you're making, like to photos and videos, to watch those renders in real time. And that's essentially what a GPU is doing. So this computer has an NVIDIA graphics card in it. I believe it's the 2060i. The GeForce RTX 2060. And it is, any NVIDIA GPU is golden. That's what I have actually in my desktop PC over here. I have the GeForce RTX 2080, and it's unreal. So mainly you're going to notice that the effect of a GPU on playback, on your rendering time, things like that. And in Lightroom specifically, the fact that you can see the adjustments I'm making instantly, there's no lag, that's your GPU. Yeah,
you need a good graphics card when you're working with these apps, photo editing, especially video editing, especially using After Effects. Video card goes a long way, so you definitely want that. It'll definitely speed up that workflow. Cool.
This computer also has, do you want me to keep editing? I can talk about the computer. We'll keep editing, and we'll go back to some other great points about what you need in a laptop or any computer you're looking to purchase. I actually have a whole video on that exactly, and I try and explain things in its simplest form. Because I think it's daunting for anyone when they're looking for a new computer. They're like, oh my gosh, all of these. And if you're not a super techie person, you can just get lost in forums and totally like come out of it just going, I think I'm more confused than I was at the beginning. Does anyone feel like that?
I agree. It's we could definitely nerd out over all these technical jargon terms, but honestly it can be daunting. But the more you look into it and the more you understand what does what in a system and why it helps out with a certain task, then it's kind of all these puzzle pieces that start coming together and you kind of understand the whole thing a little better.
Exactly.
We got some questions from Christy. She's asking, she's got two of them. What were your best resources for learning how to use Lightroom, and what did you say happens when you hold down the Alt button? Or sorry, the Alt key. I think.
What did I say happens when you hold the Alt key? So that's mainly if you're, the Alt key was when you're in the sharpening section down here. If you hold down Alt and drag these sliders, it just helps you see how the sharpening is affecting the photo a little bit more easily. And what was the first part of the question?
It was, what were the best resources for learning how to use Lightroom? Yeah.
Great question. A lot of trial and error, to be honest with you, because I think there is a certain amount of knowledge that goes into understanding the program that you're using. But at the end of the day, to develop your own personal editing style, you kind of just have to do that on your own. If you're brand new and, at editing, in Lightroom. Lightroom's super intuitive, first of all, to use in comparison to Photoshop, which I think a lot of people, if you're not a pro in Photoshop, then it's still daunting even for me sometimes when I'm going to do something I've never done before. But a lot of trial and error and tutorials, watching how, and I mean, I'm constantly learning new things based on how I find other creators use these same tools and sliders differently. I think there's a girl on YouTube named Anita, and she was using dehaze to actually smooth out skin, and that blew my mind. That was something I'd never thought about or have never done. It's just not my go-to tool for that effect. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll try that and see if it gives a different look, to my photos next time. And that's kind of what I love about it, is there's no right or wrong way to edit, and how you use these tools. It's personal taste. But the more that you edit, the more you understand how to kind of make that image in your head translate into that photograph.
I agree. Yeah, I think you touch up on some great points, Lizzie. I think it's definitely a hybrid model where you can watch all the videos about Lightroom, read up all the resources, and that definitely helps a lot. But at the end of the day, you got to get your hands dirty with Lightroom. Fire up that app, mess around with some sliders, see what they do, and just kind of learn that way. And there's, like Lizzie said, there's so many ways to learn. I mean, I've been using the app for over 6 years, and I'm still learning new things all the time. So that's really cool thing about these apps.
So that was the final photo. I'm pretty happy with this.
That looks awesome. A lot of mood.
Thanks.
I love it.
A lot of mood. We went moody for this one. Oh, sorry. Just bringing myself out of full screen. It doesn't seem to want me to do that. It really wants to show you guys this photo.
Now we have it full display. It's looking great.
I'm just waiting for it to bring me back. Do we want to answer a question in the meantime?
Yeah, let's see what else we got. I think we were talking about the binoculars. The binoculars seem like sad face for me. They look a little sad, a little moody. I'm gonna hop off your screen for a sec.
It kind of reminds me of, what was that character in Star Wars? The little robot guy.
R2-D2?
I don't think it's R2-D2, the tall gold one.
Oh, C-3PO. Yeah.
C-3PO. Exactly. Oh, it is not happy with me right now.
Okay. Oh. Well, we're off your screen for now, so feel free to exit if you need to.
Well,
let's see. So
the other thing I can talk about in the meantime is, while this catches up, it just really wants to show me this photo. The other thing that you're looking for in an editing computer, and I wish someone explained this to me as simply as I am now when I started this whole process, and every time I've looked into buying a new computer, and you always read about, one of the highlights is always the processor. I was like, what the hell is that? So if you think about a processor, and they're always like, this many cores, it has 4 cores, 6 cores, 7 cores, all 9 cores, whatever. You want as many cores as possible that you can afford to purchase in your processor. Because if you think about each processor as lanes on a highway, for example, you think about whatever you're doing and having all those applications open as cars on that highway, the more lanes you have, the less traffic you'll have, the less, build up and clogs and slower speeds on that highway. So that's essentially, in its simplest form, what you want in a processor. And I would say your GPU and your processor are 2 big ones.
Those are big ones.
Yeah, those are big ones. So, and this particular computer has an i7. You can come back to my screen now. We're good. Okay, good.
Yeah, we're on it. Real quick, we had a request from the chat, Lizzie, and I think it's a good idea. On that first photo we finished editing, can we get a before and after? So we can hit that / key or do the before and after view, but let's see how it looks before and after. Yeah, check that out. That came out awesome.
Well, thank you.
Very, very flat photo, and then we did some localized adjustments with the gradient filter. a bit of touching up, and you really accentuated. I don't think we found out what our little C3PO friend is called. I mean, we know they're binoculars, but I don't know if there's like a special term just
I don't know. That's what we'll call him. He's our friend now.
C3PO came out great. Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, that edit was awesome.
All right. So why don't we edit something that has a human in it and not an object?
Cool. I think someone at the beginning of the chat too was looking for some help with portrait photography, so this will be great.
Perfect. So we've got lots of that. So this is my beautiful friend Joelle, who was my model a couple weeks ago. And I mean, I believe I ended up building a preset for this photo with her. But what we'll do is we'll pick a different one. So I'm just scrolling through some of them to figure out which one I like so I can show you guys my process in that. So the two I liked the baby blues. This one is definitely like a warmer highlight. It's kind of a teal and orange effect. That would be my best description of that one. So I like that one, but also this is honestly 90% of the time my favorite preset that I built, and it's called Classic Boost. This is the vintage black. It basically just means I lifted the blacks a little bit. So that's always a good place to start if I'm never sure. That pretty much looks good on every photo because so I call it Classic Boost. That's exactly what it does.
So to recap, are you adding this preset first and then you're going to make adjustments based on this kind of like preset that you added?
So I'm going to select the preset first, and then we're going to make some adjustments based on this particular photo.
Awesome.
Cool. Cool. So honestly, you could leave the photo as is if you want, but let's have some fun. I'm just going to take a look. The first thing I'll do is kind of scan my settings and see if there's anything I notice right away that I don't like. Because we're editing a female subject, normally I don't want it too sharp because, and we'll get into this a bit more tomorrow, I do some light skin retouching on my portraits as well. But because this is so far away kind of from her skin, I don't think we'll actually need to do that on this particular photo. So I can show you what I'll do all within Lightroom just to soften her skin and make it look perfect. So awesome. I'm gonna back up the sharpening a little bit. And especially in the detail, you can really see like that almost looks like nothing, but over here in this small square, you can see how this is affecting the photo. I don't think Joelle would want me to show every tiny pore in her face. So that's what we're gonna work on. So I'm happier with that. That was one thing that was bothering me with that preset. And now I might play a little bit around with the tone curve.
While you're doing that, we have a question from the chat. What's a good amount of time to spend on a photo? Average time? Do you ever step away and come back? It's a good question.
That is a good question. I don't think you can ever kind of set an average time. If everything went well in taking that photo, then it might take you less time. If a few things are off or you're dealing with some weather that isn't really cooperating, then maybe it's going to take you a little bit longer. And it depends how, like, some photos that I take, I know this is one of my favorite photos of the shoot. I want to spend a ton of time on this one. And I kind of like give myself no limit as to how long I spend because I just want to make sure it's perfect. But occasionally, yeah, if I'm not feeling like I'm getting anywhere and I'm not happy with my edit, I'll step away and come back to it for sure. Because sometimes when you're staring at the same photo for so long, you just, you can go so far with your edit that you've lost like the original feel of what you're trying to go for. And and then you just have to kind of like hit reset and come back a different day.
Yeah, 100% agreed. Sometimes you just got to walk away, get a fresh pair of eyes on that photo. And sometimes you'll see like, whoa, what was I doing? Reset. Or you'll see the things that little puzzle piece that you couldn't figure out, then you'll figure it out and it'll be done.
You come back and you're like, that looks awful. I'm so glad I waited and didn't post that. And also showing it to another person who has a set of fresh eyes. Like Chris and I will show each other our photos and I'll be like, I don't know, I think you should sit on that, or that looks way too blue or way too warm, or but it's hard for you to tell when you've been staring at it for a really long time. So I'm just checking out where exactly I want to go with these highlights. How warm do I want them to get? So this is always fun when I'm starting a photo too that has this many greens in it. I'm like, do I want to go with a really dried out, you know, fall kind of green look? Or do I want like a bluey green? Obviously this is terrible and we would change this, but you know what I mean? I can never decide which way I want to go.
And I think what you're doing is a great way to figure out how much you want of a slider. Just kind of take it to an extreme and then slowly dial it back just to see where that right point is.
Because with every photo, you have to see what is affecting what. Exactly. And how much it's going to affect your photo. So occasionally on photos, you'll notice like in this preset, I have my purple set all the way over here. And I think that's just affecting her shirt.
The shirt, yeah.
Yeah. So it depends, like what you're looking for. I actually might just bring it back to where it was, or sorry, over to the red side, because I think her shirt is naturally just pink. So let's leave that the way it was. That's the thing about presets. You kind of have to go through everything to make sure there isn't something kind of wonky affecting your photo. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of a one size doesn't fit all, you know, slap it on there and then just see what adjustments you need to make based off that preset.
So luminance is normally something I'm reaching to when I want to emphasize a particular color, or when I'm using the orange slider. Usually I know it's affecting my model's skin. And in this case, if you bring it down, sometimes it can make someone who's very washed out look a little more tanned and give them a little more color to their skin. You could also do that with saturation. It just might make them look like an Oompa Loompa. But in this case, I'll probably bring up the luminance, because as you can see, it makes her skin, if I bring it all the way up to 100, it's making her skin really like glowy, and you can also just see her a bit more rather than, and that obviously looks terrible. So we'll probably cap it somewhere in here. But normally, yeah, with the preset, we're just doing like minor adjustments. It looks like the exposure is pretty good. Again, if you're not sure, you could always like hold shift and double click the exposure, and it really went up quite a bit, but obviously that to us that looks like a bit too much. So I think we're happy with where it was. Sometimes, yeah, the double click doesn't work. Sometimes it's helpful.
Speaking of presets, we have a question from Osama saying, how do you build and create your presets? What's the theory behind them? Maybe we can finish this edit, and then if we have time for it, you can show on how to actually make a preset, or kind of do one from start to finish.
It's actually pretty simple. So when you're happy with your settings, so let me just scroll up here. You would just hit this little plus, and we're in the presets column over here, and you just hit create preset. It's also where you would go to import presets as well.
Cool. Yeah, so I guess the theory behind it, so to say, Osama, is you kind of edit a photo, and we're obviously dealing with portrait photography and people here, so obviously this preset would be more catered towards people. So if Lizzie does a bunch of edits and likes how this looks and it was part of the same shoot, then she could just save all those settings and make it a preset and apply to other ones and see how they play. And again, you want to kind of finagle all the different adjustments if you need to for other photos, because again, as we were saying, one preset may not fit all.
100%. And when I am building a preset pack, I have so many different versions of them. Like I think at one point I had like 15 versions of one preset because I just wanted to pick the one that I felt suited the largest variety of photos that I was testing it on. And I mean, I've seen a lot of creators too who just create multiple versions. And so they'll have like the same kind of color effects, but they'll adjust like little things like maybe it's the blacks or the highlights or the saturation or the exposure, and just like subtle tweaks that they find, okay, if it didn't work on one photo, then they can apply this other one and that might be a closer fit.
So what are you doing now, Lizzie? It looks like you're doing some brushing on the face.
Yeah. So you can either use, if you're using the brush, you can make your own custom brush, or there are actually some presets. Well, they're not actually popping up right now. It's just funny, but I'm sure on your version, you'll see that like there's a softened skin preset usually. Or maybe it's because I'm in the, no, that's funny. Usually there's a softened skin preset or an iris enhanced preset. So you can use some of those. I usually just dial in my own depending on what I'm doing, because sometimes it can be a little bit intense. And I'm usually just adjusting the clarity and the sharpness. And now I'm going in with the healing tool. And I'm just gonna zoom in really close on her face. Thank you, Joelle, for letting us use your face. And just smoothing out some of the little, I don't want to use the word imperfections, but some of the texture in her skin, just so it's not distracting to the overall image. And when we're doing skin retouching, I don't like to do anything too intense or make someone look like a plastic doll.
Yeah.
You want to be pretty natural with it. And in this case, like I'll just take out this hair. Sometimes you can do things like this within Lightroom and it looks pretty good. And then the next thing I'll do is create a new brush. Let's just select exposure for now. So usually I'll just bring up this one. I'm really subtle with, especially because Joelle has dark eyes. So I'm going to be editing her eyes now just to make them pop a little bit more. I bring up the shadows. I'll bring up the clarity a little bit, bring up the contrast a little bit. And just kind of color those in. And again, if you hit O, you can see kind of what that's affecting. Now she looks like a demon.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of, her eyes look pretty blue for some reason. And sometimes I can compensate for that a little bit in the temperature, but I also don't want them to look yellow at the same time. So this may not totally work. It's not great, but I think that's helping a tiny bit. And then, so I kind of use one overall brush, and then I will go in again just on the actual iris of her eye, just to emphasize. And especially with someone with lighter eyes, this works a little bit better because her eyes are so dark. I don't want to bring them up to an unnatural level where she looks like a demon. But on someone who has lighter eyes, like me, I have green eyes, I can really emphasize the color. Or sometimes you can actually go in with the tint. If someone's eyes are blue and you're like, I want them to be really blue, obviously that's way too much, but you can make like little adjustments there. Or with my eyes, usually I'll make them like even more green. So you could actually, her eyes might work if you wanted to make them a little bit on the greener side, but little tweak.
Just all those little things add up, though. I mean, it may seem like minor things, but once you add all those things with all the minor tweaks, that's how you really get a nice edit. Cool.
Exactly.
I want to give some love to the chat real quick. We have Cornell asking, do you create new presets after every edited image?
If I have a preset that I didn't like on some of the photos that I took, If I have presets that I didn't like on the photos that I took and I've created a new one, then I'll definitely save it, because it can either go towards a new preset pack or maybe it'll look good on a photo later. I definitely just want to save those settings if it's something I really, really liked. I don't want to lose that, because sometimes it just speeds up your editing process. With some of the photos, I took some headshots recently, and I think it was that classic boost preset that I applied, and I was like, well, this already looks great. You know, I made a couple tweaks, and it takes me so much less time now to edit a large stack of photos all taken in the same environment, specifically headshots. So I'm pretty happy with this overall. So there's a before and after.
Oh, wow. It came out so great. The lighting too, I think, was done really well with that sun kind of in the background, giving her that rim light in her hair, almost making it glow.
Sometimes
awesome.
The lighting does it for you.
Yeah. We have one more question. It says, for travel pictures with my family, the skin tone always look a little bit too yellow, too dark, especially when the saturation is high. Is there any way to correct the skin tone for this purpose?
I'm going to assume that that's just within camera that you're probably noticing that right after the photo's taken.
Yeah, you'll have to specify, but let's assume that.
Yeah. I would say that's probably your white balance that's off, depending on the environment you're shooting in, if they look a bit too yellow. I'd be interested to know what camera you're shooting with, because sometimes the colors on, a Sony, everyone talks about Canon color versus Sony color. They can be a little bit different, not usually on the warmer side. But I would check your white balance and just make sure you're exposed correctly. If that's coming out in camera. If you're having trouble within Lightroom to get the desired kind of skin tone that you want, then it might just take some finessing without seeing the photo. I mean, maybe you want to submit a photo and I can edit it tomorrow, because we will be doing that a little later on. And then I could edit, maybe give you some suggestions. But because when it comes to the specifics of what to do on that photo, it's hard to say. If they look a bit yellow, I would probably suggest working on perfecting that skin tone in the HSL color panel, and playing around with a combination of, because it's not just the hue and it's not just the saturation. It's a combination of everything there. And also, if you, not that one, maybe in the calibration section down here.
Yeah.
You might
and one thing I'll say, I think it was G Sun that asked this question. I don't know if this is if you're doing this, it's hard to tell without giving specifications, but also if you're shooting raw, that could be a big one too. Like, let's say you're shooting photos JPEG, and when you're shooting JPEG, there's kind of this baked in color profile, and there's not much wiggle room to kind of adjust that white balance in Lightroom.
A good point.
So assuming you are shooting JPEG, then what you might want to do is shoot raw, because when you shoot raw, then you have so much room to kind of mess with the colors and the tones in post. So even if you shoot raw and then mess with the white balance on that photo, you can actually mess with the white balance a lot. And maybe you can even find that you can fix the skin tones just by being able to shoot raw and then messing with that white balance and saturation.
Great point. I always just assume that it's raw.
I know, we do too, but
I know.
Sometimes beginners don't know that. So I just want to point that out. You might be, and then that's a different story. And it might be what Lizzie said, but if you're not shooting raw, make sure you are shooting raw.
So someone had a question earlier about, this is a great photo to show this on. I think I might edit a different one next. But just to show you guys how the little, it's called the straighten tool. I don't know why I want to call it the ruler tool always, but yeah, using this kind of horizon line. It's not even really the horizon, just the line between the mountain and the lake, and drawing a straight line. And then that kind of straightened the photo already right there. But I might actually crop in a little bit because I want this mountain peak to be totally centered. I'm a bit of a stickler for having photos perfectly
I think we all are when it comes to that horizon. I think if there's anything that bothers us photographers, it's just the skewed horizon.
Yeah. No kidding. And I think I might post this photo actually. I really liked saying that classic boost is my favorite one. like just for the sake of doing a quick edit here, if I threw on that preset and you brought down highlights a little, I might do the same thing with the gradient in the top. I have a feeling that there isn't going to be much left up there because it was snowing and it was completely white. So just for fun, yeah, if we brought it down, there really isn't much up there. But you could always do, I mean, sometimes people love a good blown out sky look. Chris in particular, he's more of a gradient man.
Gradient man. Sounds like a superhero.
He's a gradient man. So sometimes he'll insist on having something up there. But yeah, because once you add, especially if this is going to be an Instagram, which is most of my photos, just they live there now, you know, they live in Instagram. Again, very thankful for the megapixels on my camera that allow me to crop. Yeah, that would be, cool. I would already be pretty happy with that. That's a little quick one. Maybe I would tweak things just for, you know, just for fun, but I like that as it is. Let's do.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's going back to that question, how long does it take a photo? And it really just depends. I mean, sometimes it takes 2 minutes, sometimes it takes 2 hours.
Yeah.
And at some point you got to decide when you're done editing it, because honestly, some of those photos you can take forever, but it's really up to you.
And like sometimes with this type of photo, there is this effect that I can do in Photoshop where it makes these highlights look a little glowier. We won't do that today, but I mean, maybe tomorrow, I don't know.
Who knows? Tune in and find out.
Who knows? You'll have to find out tomorrow. But yeah, sometimes that's something I would do, but yeah.
Cool. We have a quick question from Katerina. Lizzie, do you ever use Lightroom on your phone? What do you think about it? Thanks. Smiley face.
Oh, I know who that is. She actually, we've DM'd a few times. She won a contest that I had, I think my 100K contest. This is the same Ekaterina. Hi. I remember you.
Awesome.
I do use Lightroom Mobile, and sometimes, usually it's for stories. If I've taken some photos, and then I will pair my camera up with my phone, and I'll, you know, because I'm obsessed with the photo and I want it to go up in my stories right away, or if I really want to edit it right away, and I can tell it's the type of photo that I can probably do those adjustments in Lightroom Mobile. If I want to be tweaking things a little more precisely, then I would be using the desktop version. But yeah, I love it. Sometimes you do an edit in Lightroom Mobile and you're like, wow, I can't believe I just did that on my phone, and it looks great and I love it, and now I will post it. And it still blows my mind that we can even do that.
Agreed. Quick time check. So we have about 30-ish minutes before we get into portfolio reviews. So we could do about 35 minutes more worth of editing. We'll do portfolio reviews, and then we might come back and do a little bit more editing.
Sweet. So as you guys can see here, this photo was taken with my drone, my Mavic 2 Pro, and it was a panorama, which is why the edges of it look like that. If you're curious about how to stitch that together, all you would do is highlight, I'll show you down here. Obviously these are different photos, but, or maybe we'll take this one here. If you highlight all three of those, so if you just hit shift and then select all three of them, you would just right click and go to photo merge, and you would just do panorama or HDR panorama, depending on how many photos you took. And for these photos, we'll do that a little bit later. I would select HDR, but we'll get into that a little bit later if we have time. But yeah, you would just select panorama, and then it would do all the work for you, really. And that's how you would get to something like this. You crop in just to avoid the little bit of, what do you want to call that, warp or curving on the edges there because of the nature of the stitching. Okay, now let's have some fun with this one. So it's come out super saturated, which is, and again, this is my favorite one. This is my favorite go-to. That preset, just so funny.
Which one is it?
The Classic Boost Vintage Black. But we'll edit this one from scratch just for fun. I actually I actually have edited this before, and I think I did a bit. I had just posted this one actually before the live, so I really want to do it live for you guys. But we'll see if I come up with a similar look or a different one.
It's always fun redoing the same photo, and a lot of times when I personally do it, it's almost a little bit different, and then I like prefer the second round. But it's really hard to get it exactly right just doing it from scratch.
I know. And
I think people will appreciate that. We had some comments saying it'd be great to see the photo from start to finish without adding a preset so we can see the whole process. So we're going to do that now,
for sure.
which is awesome.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah, and sometimes we'll go back to photos we took on like previous trips and we'll hate the edits we did like 2 years ago. And I say we as in Chris and I because we're always doing things side by side. And then we'll talk about how much we hated the old edits and then we'll redo them all and then post them again. Because everything changes, like your knowledge of how to use the software changes and you're better at getting like the look you want too. Normally,
real quick reminder.
Lizzie.
Real quick reminder: those of you that are joining us on YouTube, come on over to Behance. That's actually where the conversation is taking place. So I'm looking at questions coming in from Behance. So if you're on YouTube, go on over there and ask us questions, and we'll try and relay them to Lizzie. So we still have a lot coming in. We're doing our best to try and get to those questions. While we're at it, Fairy's asking, do I have to shoot with the lowest ISO possible?
It's always better to shoot with the lowest ISO possible. And knowing your camera to know where you're going to get some significant grain from your ISO depends on your camera. So I would definitely do some research on that. Yeah. But normally, I think for most cameras, it's about ISO 800. It's pretty much clean up until that point. Yeah. Some I would say like when I was using my T3i, I think I would still notice some if I was at 600 and like anything above 400, I would still notice it.
Is that your first camera, the T3i?
Yeah.
That's so funny. That was my first one as well.
It was a lot of people's first one.
Well, because it was kind of like that consumer hybrid of video and photo.
Exactly.
So that's why I got it, because it could take photo, and then I was also dabbling with video. But yeah, it's a great point, exactly. Lizzie. I think you should definitely check your camera and honestly do some testing for yourself to see what the most acceptable noise that comes from ISO is for you. For example, if you're doing astrophotography or night photography, you're gonna have to bump that ISO up to really get those stars. But figure out what the cutoff is for you, because sometimes it's just too noisy and it's hard to even save that in post, or it just gets too soft when you add too much denoise. But it's best to just kind of test different ISOs and figure out what your acceptable noise level is. So no right or wrong answer. It's just whatever you're comfortable with. Obviously, you don't want it to be too noisy because then it just looks too noisy. But I think there's a good balance there.
It's always finding a healthy balance of your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed. It's always a fun game to play.
Mm-hmm. We have a question from Maita. I believe I'm saying that right. How do you organize your Lightroom catalog? One catalog with all the projects or one catalog per project?
One catalog per project. And then I'll usually make a quick collection of my favorite photos. And so, depending on what I'm doing, sometimes I'll do the star ratings too. But definitely one catalog per project.
How many photos would you say are in a project? Like, are you making a catalog with 500 photos, with thousands of photos?
Oh, it could be, if it's from a trip, and depending on how long the trip was, it could be, it could be 1,000. It could be, Nice. If it's only one shoot, it's probably, I think the last shoot I did, it was just some headshots and some interiors of the space was only about 200. Mm-hmm. So, which already seems like a lot. So storage is fun.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, there's a bunch of different workflows to do it. Catalog per project, catalog for all the photos. I think the upside of having many catalogs is if you lose one catalog, then you're not losing everything. Then you can always make backups, of course. But
when I started, I actually had one catalog that I was putting all my photos into when I didn't know how to organize everything properly. And it was very stressful, and I would not recommend that. Yeah. It just becomes like a huge nightmare. I would always recommend, having one catalog per project. It just becomes too stressful to find Like you're just scrolling down here endlessly.
It's a lot, yeah. We have a question from Cheryl. Where is the auto setting you can start with? So 2 ways to do that. It's the way that Lizzie said, and then you can just hit the auto button. There is a shortcut for the auto button. I forget what it is, but we'll get back to you on that. So what's going on with the edit, Lizzie? What are we doing now?
So this is a fun one. When I figured out this trick, it changed my editing game. Gradient tool. The graduated filter tool. I don't know why I always call it the gradient tool. So you can tell, I'll just delete it actually for a hot second. So you can see where the sun's coming from in this image, somewhere back here. And I really want you to get a sense of that like warm ray of sun that's shining down on this photo and add a bit of dimension to the frame. Because right now, I mean, you can see it's not flat. You obviously have the depth of the mountains, but adding some kind of, I love the graduated filter tool for adding a bit of light in one corner and darkness in the other, or same thing we did with the photo at the beginning, you know, darkening the sky, just pulling your eye towards the subject in the image, which is this castle. So I'll just pull that graduated filter over from the corner. And again, if you hold down O, you can see where that's affecting your image. And if you don't like the placement, you could start all over, or you could just use the little like hand grab tool and move it around. And then I will just use the temperature slider and I'll warm it up a little bit.
Nice.
Now it looks like we have a beautiful warm ray of sunshine falling on this castle. And if you want, if you don't feel like it's bright enough, you can also add a little bit of you'll bring up the exposure a little bit too. And if you want it to look a little like mistier, you could dehaze that a tiny bit. Might pull it a little bit more so it looks like it's just falling over that castle.
Yeah.
And
That's
I
great.
might
Just
rotate
with one
it a
effect,
tiny
we
bit.
already have a entirely different photograph, but you're really accentuating that sunlight. It's looking great.
Yeah, exactly. And I might actually do the opposite effect down here.
Nice. Dodge and burn, so to say.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's just a matter of how do you make it easy for your audience to focus on the subject in the image in a natural way, always.
Yeah, you don't want to make it too obvious that it was manipulated, so to say, but you know, there's always a question, how much editing is too much editing? That's a very loaded question on how you edit. But I think a good rule of thumb is just edit it to how you remember the scene or what you want to accentuate, right? Like here, clearly the focal point is the sunlight hitting the castle, which is beautiful. So we're attracting the light to that subject, and Lizzie's doing an awesome job at it already.
Yeah, it's always tricky, and that's why there is a certain amount of feel to the photo and turning things on and off and moving sliders, you know, dramatically one way to the next, because you're just trying to see, okay, what naturally, if I just looked at this and wasn't staring at this for hours, you know, what would I want to see?
And now we're adding, I think it's the radial. I always get the names confused too. But
Yeah,
I think we're adding
radial.
The radial adjustment. Now what we're doing is we're either making adjustments to the inside of this or outside of that. We can invert that. But it's another tool to kind of add more attention to whatever's inside of that.
Exactly. And I mean, there obviously is the vignette slider at the bottom, but I just don't find I get enough. I never get the look I want, or it's never as subtle enough for me. So just so you guys can see if you've never used this before, right now this is affecting the outside of the filter, and you can actually go down here and invert that. Depends on what you're trying to do and what stage your edit's at. But right now, we're just going to work with the outside of the image. So I'm going to darken it a tiny bit. So I'll bring down the exposure. And I brought down the clarity a touch as well, just to draw your eye to the sharpness of the inside of the frame.
It's looking so great. Can we do it before and after? I always love hitting that / key, just to kind of see where it is before and after. Look at that. That's a great edit. That's looking awesome.
Thank you. Is it the / key for you? Because for me, it's Y.
Yeah, so there's two ways to do it. There's Y does this view, and then if you hit the / key, so the one right above return, so in between return and delete, then it kind of turns off the edits and turns them back on.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, just for Mac. I hope it really. Yeah, here we go.
Oh, no, it doesn't like
made
it.
your photo disappear.
I've never
At least
used
it is
that
for
one.
Mac. I'll have to see what it is for PC. We have a question from the chat real quick. Michael's asking, what camera can you suggest for a beginner?
For a beginner, depends on your price point for sure. And it depends if are you a photographer, videographer? There's a lot of factors, and kind of what kind of photo you're taking, where you want it to go. I would, if you want to get into something that you could use, semi-amateur to, if you did want to shoot a few professional shoots with it down the line, I would go for, I'm obviously going to rep Sony. I would go for, I'm shooting right now, so you guys are seeing me through my A6400, which I love. Of course, there is the A66 too, so if you can go for something a little newer, I believe the battery life is a little bit better on that, but I think the A6400 is a fantastic camera.
Yep,
it is a crop sensor, but that's okay.
But budget is a big one. Honestly, if you don't have the budget to buy that, I would say just start shooting with your phone. Assuming you have a smartphone or just a phone, and you're really, really starting out, just start shooting and seeing what you like. And once you start getting into photography and seeing what you like to shoot, then you can make more educated decisions, as Lizzie said, and what type of camera you want. Do you want one that focuses on video? You don't want to spend a lot of money for your first time buying a camera and then see that you want video when you bought a photo camera. So just start with what you have. See what you kind of cater to, what you kind of slide more with, photo or video, what type of shots you like. And then you can kind of start looking more at the cameras that fit what you like doing. So make more like educated decisions, because camera, they ain't cheap, right?
They are not.
Camera equipment, it's expensive toys. So
normally you can invest your money in the lenses for sure. Obviously you do need a good body, but the lenses will carry you through. And Sony has, the same mount for their entire camera line, so that you can appreciate. Your lens will normally, stand the test of time with you, depending on what body you're switching to or upgrading to. And you can usually, if you're pretty quick with the updates, or sorry, not the updates, with the with new cameras coming out, it's usually not a huge loss if you're upgrading quickly. Whereas the longer you hold, that's kind of my rule of thumb, the longer you hold on to your camera, the more it's going to depreciate. So anytime a new model comes out, you've lost a dollar amount on your camera. So if you can stand to upgrade fairly quickly, then it'll serve you better in the long run. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
If you guys, we can really quickly, if you guys want to respond in the chat, are you interested in seeing another kind of lifestyle, more like portrait or landscape, or would you guys want to see something a little bit more abstract, just because this is probably our last photo? Or would you guys like to see the real estate one, and I'll show you how I edit that?
Yeah, so let us know in the chat. Let us know if you want the blue abstract photo. I think that was you, Lizzie, on that green laying down photo.
Yeah, that's me.
So let us know if you want to see a photo of Lizzie edited, or if we want the real estate one. So it's going to take a little bit of, we have a little bit of a delay. So while those answers come in, I'll just address some other questions.
Yeah.
We have a couple questions about settings for Instagram. So Jay's asking, can you share to us how you process your photo and upload it to Instagram to become sharp? Something like that. That's something we can get to maybe later on if we have time, Lizzie, or maybe even touch up on day 2, but I'll let you.
Yeah, potentially. Normally I'm leaving my photo as is. There is something, let me just pull up my phone right now, and I can probably tell you guys what that effect is called. Sometimes I'm adding a little bit of this right before I post. I'm just going to pick a random photo here. But so the answer is yes, technically I am adding a little bit of an effect within Instagram itself.
Okay.
So right at the top, it's like a little wand. I don't know if I can show you guys. It's a little wand. It's
Yeah,
called the
I could
Lux.
go to the full screen shot. Maybe you can see this a little higher
So
res.
I just picked a random photo.
Okay.
Focus.
Oh, that wand up top. Yeah.
Yeah, this little wand up top. And sometimes if you select that, there's a little slider at the bottom here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll usually bring it somewhere around there, just a little bit. It almost looks like contrast to me. And when you're viewing something on a small screen, more contrast does look a little bit better. And so I'm trying to optimize my photos to perform better on that platform. So you do have to consider that versus if it was going to be print. Or like a billboard, or maybe not a billboard, but maybe it's going up on your wall at home, something like that. So that's something I'm always doing. And occasionally I will actually go in, again, this is an Instagram still. If you scroll all the way, I believe it's on the right at the very end, there's the sharpen tool. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of sharpness too.
Nice.
But within Instagram, that's all I'm doing.
I like that autofocus that's coming in from your camera. It looks like it has a pretty solid autofocus to focus on that and then you.
I feel like a beauty influencer when I'm holding up a product and then putting my hand behind it.
Looks good. Cool. We have a bunch of responses on what people want to see next. I would say I'm seeing a lot of portrait answers. It was a mixture between portrait and real estate, but it seems to be quite a bit more responses with portrait. Yeah, so I think the photo of you.
So I've got, that's a little far. Let's do the one of me. So again, we have lots of greens. And I mean, if you did apply the preset, that's kind of what you get, but my skin looks a little pink. So let's do this from start to finish. So I'll probably start with the tone curve.
Take it from the top.
Let's take it from the top. Presets are great for convenience, but the thing is, you don't always remember how it's affecting your photo. And you could do something wonky. And some people are, people who are more purists, they're like, you should always edit every individual photo from scratch.
Yeah, but then I'm like, what about my time?
What's my time? Exactly. This is kind of, you probably noticed I've done this on most of my photos, if not all of them in this live, where I bring up the blacks a tiny bit, but just to keep that contrast, I'm still pulling, not even sure, this little toggle. So I'm making a little bit of an S curve, but I just pull the blacks up a little bit at the end. Not so much that, it looks distorted and wonky, but just a little bit so that I'm creating that like soft black look rather than a harsh, like crushed black. I like my soft blacks. Again, that's personal preference. Oops.
Yeah, I got no right or wrong way of doing things. It's just how you like it and how you establish your look, and that's what you go off of.
Exactly. So I had a kind of a gut feeling that somewhere in here is where my skin tone would be. But again, if you're not sure where on the tone curve is affecting what part of your image, this little toggle still exists up here. So if you know, oh, I definitely want to bring down the highlights, on my forehead or the whites here, you can see that reflected in the tone curve on the right side. So that's kind of cool. There are all these tools to help you, especially when you're just starting out, make the whole thing a little bit easier. Okay. I am pretty happy with that. I might come back here a little bit. Do I want to bring the shadows down more? I think yes. There's a lot of highlights happening, so I think we'll bring them down a tiny bit.
Did you have artificial lighting for this shot, or was this all natural lighting?
No, it was natural lighting.
It came out great. I mean, you're definitely kind of lit really well, so I think that's a great photo off the bat.
We were in Ireland, and that's why we kind of thought all the clovers was like a nice touch. We were there with the tourism board, and so I just laid down. It wasn't the most comfortable thing. I think my butt was definitely a little bit wet after that, but
Gotta do it for the shot.
Fun. Yeah, you do it for the shot. And yeah, this is one of my favorite photos that we've taken on a trip for sure.
Yeah, it came out great. Great composition
too. Thanks. I'm always one for a bit of negative space. So I love putting myself kind of a little bit in the bottom of the frame. And yeah, sometimes I'm adjusting the vibrance and saturation, but I find if I'm doing that, because there's such like dramatic effects on your photo, I don't normally go there until the very end. So now we're gonna go back to the HSL panel. I mean, we could do, you know, a lighter green here, but maybe let's try for a bluier dark green. So obviously this looks quite dramatic and quite saturated, but don't worry, we're gonna fix it.
There's more.
So normally, yeah, the saturation is gonna help. Obviously that's too much. Obviously we didn't want it any brighter. If we're looking for like a dark bluey green, I will go in with the saturation and kind of give myself a little bit of help there by desaturating those greens. Now we've got like a bluey dark green. And then, yeah, I'll do one whole color area all at one time. There's your luminance fully brought up. There it is all the way down. And we're gonna find a healthy place to be. We'll leave that there for now. I might come back later and tweak some things. What's bothering me in the moment is this empty space down here. Let's see if we can just fix that within Lightroom. So I'm going to the heal tool. Maybe we'll actually try clone for this. Let's give it a shot. I'm gonna click there. Ooh, if you're lazy and you don't want to go into Photoshop, then
that looks great off the bat.
Yeah, it doesn't actually look too bad at all.
Yeah.
So sometimes heal is a little bit more forgiving. I think I like heal a little bit better. It looks a little more natural and like it's falling off in the darkness there. But yeah, that looks pretty good.
It's looking good. All right, I have 2 questions for you real quick, Lizzie.
Yeah.
Michael's asking, doing photography. Oh, sorry, that's a comment. It's Elise Morel Photography. Says, my photos look over sharpened on Instagram. Why and how can I prevent this effect, which ruins the photo? You might have to give a little more context, Alice.
Over sharpened.
We don't know exactly what you're doing to your photos, but off the bat, Lizzie, do you know if there's sort of if your photo is too sharp on Instagram, what you can do?
That's an interesting problem to have because I find a lot of people are probably thinking about the opposite, or experience the opposite effect, I would say, if anything. But it's probably because when you're editing your photos, I'm assuming you're editing in Lightroom, your photo's about this big. So if you're doing like major adjustments to it, and then when it gets shrunk down, all of that gets compressed and can look much more intense, small. So if you're really cranking the clarity or really cranking your sharpness, and maybe it's the clarity, I might take a guess here and say it's the clarity, then maybe you're just adding too much. And that's something that you'll notice over time is going to get, you'll finesse and you'll get a little bit better at doing.
For sure. And then the next one is coming from Steve. He's asking, Lizzie, do you know or have you met Paul Nicklin and his partner Mitty? They are photographers and Canadian.
I have not met them. Those names sound familiar though.
Yeah, I think Paul Nicklin does very awesome environmental photography and is very active at that. And he's got great photos of
and he's in Toronto?
Out there. Yeah, I think they're Canadian. I guess that's a no, Steve.
Canada is a very large place. But if they're in Toronto, then there is absolutely no reason why I should not have met him. That would be so silly.
Cool. So we have about 7 minutes left before we go into portfolio reviews. So we can either finish this one up if it's going to take 7 minutes, or we can even maybe start another one and then maybe hop back into it if we have enough time.
Well, I might, knowing me, spend a lot more time being picky, but I think
we can keep going.
This is actually one thing I didn't show you guys. I can show on this photo if you're really interested in portraits. I will oftentimes go ahead and paint over my hair. And sometimes I'm doing that with highlights because I find like the ends of my hair are really light, but the roots can fall into the darkness because as a natural blonde, you know, my hair grows in a little darker than it is in real life. And I want it to look really nice and bright, and not even as a personal preference and how I want my own hair to look. I just want it to be visible. So sometimes I'll go in and I'll bring up like the shadows a little bit, or I'll bring up the highlights, or sometimes I'm even bringing up the exposure a tiny bit.
Whoa.
That's a lot. So if you want me to look like I have no hair, that's one way to do it. Yeah, just to make it stand out a little more. And you can even go in with the texture and bring that up a tiny bit. Because you want it to, I mentioned in a previous video, you almost want your portraits to feel like someone can reach out and touch their hair, or, you know, see how smooth their skin is, and almost feel like there's a bit of a sensory aspect to it. So you want their hair to look nice and textured and not too over softened. Like you might want your skin to be a little softer than the hair on your subject, for example.
It's a great tip.
And now we're looking very closely at my face. Don't worry, guys. I don't feel vulnerable at all.
That is very sharp. That
It is very
resolution.
sharp. In case you guys were wondering if this photo was in focus, it definitely is.
Now we can tell it is in focus.
Now you can tell. And yeah, tomorrow, if you guys come back on this photo, I'll show you how I would skin retouch a photo like this. So yeah. So we've got about 4 minutes left. What can I show you?
Maybe we can start. It seemed like the real estate photo was another popular one that people wanted to see. So maybe we can just kind of start editing that, and then in a couple of minutes, I'll just transition over to photography, or sorry, the portfolio reviews.
So the first thing I would do with this real estate one is highlight. So I shot this photo with a bracketed exposure. So basically what that means is I'm taking my middle photo is a perfect exposure, and it's also taking one photo one stop under and one photo one stop over. And that's just to ensure that I'm in a room that, you know, doesn't have studio lighting and everything's even. I want to make sure I can see a little bit out the windows, that they're not super blown out, that I have enough room in the shadows to bring those up a little bit later. So I'm going to blend these 3 photos together by right-clicking on all of them, highlighted, photo merge, HDR. You could also hit Control M, it looks like. But, you know, force of habit when you just get used to right-clicking, and so many shortcuts.
Oh yeah.
And then just hit merge, and now you'll see it started up here processing that photo.
This is
this is
super easy. Yeah, this is super easy on Lightroom. Great easy way to do HDR photography. I actually shoot a lot of HDR photography. When you have beautiful sunsets, you want to get all that dynamic range of the foreground and the background. If you had one, then you got to compromise and either expose for the sunset or for the foreground. With the HDR photography or bracketed photography, you can do it so you take 3 shots in just one shutter click, and then it'll take a low exposed, a high exposed, and then a just right one. And then you do what Lizzie just showed, you combine those, and then you get one single image with all that dynamic range. So you have the best of all worlds.
Exactly. So now my white balance looks kind of off to me, and, you know, who knows, in the moment, maybe something happened and I made an error. I made a grave mistake and my white balance wasn't perfect, but it's okay. You can usually fix it. That looks too pink. That still looks a bit green. Sometimes you can just manually go, hey, this looks a little bit green to me. Why don't I just...
Uh-oh. Lizzie,
you can grab the little eyedropper.
Quit. Are you still there? Hey, Lizzie, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we still have your feed, but I saw that Zoom just quit, so I'm wondering where you are. You're still moving. I see you. Let me
Okay.
hit, let's see. Don't send. Well, I guess this is a great time to transfer over to portfolio reviews. So I can still see you. Can you hear me?
Okay. You just don't have my screen?
No, I have your screen. I can see you. That I don't know what that pop-up meant, but I can
Okay.
see you and I have your screen shared.
I don't know
still.
either. Okay, good.
Cool.
Cool.
So with
Well,
that,
if-
let's transition into portfolio reviews. Can you see my screen still, Lizzie?
Yeah, I can. The only thing I was going to say, if you guys were wondering if you're hanging on and you wish you heard the end of my sentence, you can just grab the eyedropper and click anywhere in the screen that's white. And that usually gives you some accurate white balance too. So that's what I did for this photo.
Cool. And we still have your screen, so
Now we
everybody's
can do
able
the
to see that.
portfolio reviews.
Great. Okay, so
Cool.
let's hop on to portfolio reviews. We have one portfolio we're going to look at. We'll look at it for about the next 15 minutes, and then we'll have a little bit of time to come back to Lizzie's screen. So let's go ahead and do that now. Lizzie, I believe you have the portfolio review on your end as well. Yep, there we go.
Yep.
So I'm going to share your screen, and then we can have a look at it. Boom. So here we are.
Great.
We have Nikita Bastlova. I hope I didn't butcher that, but we're going to go ahead and look at your portfolio review. Congratulations. Thanks for submitting. And yeah, let's have a look at it. Off the bat, Lizzie, do you have any comments? Obviously, it seems to be wedding based.
These look great, honestly, I think. And I'm sure your clients are really happy with these. They look great. I can see there that use some weddings, some other events, some portraits, definitely a lot of, great photography techniques are being applied in these. Overall, I mean, we peaked at this a little bit before, but I'm loving it so far.
Yeah, it's looking good. Let's have a look at through some of the photos
Yeah.
so we can click on them individually and just kind of see what's going on.
Let's take this photo,
Okay.
for example. Just gonna wait a hot second for it to.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we click on the portfolio and then it's a collection
Oh,
of
it's like a
shots.
whole.
It's a whole project.
Oh, cool. Well, that's fun. The one thing I would say is I can tell that your skin tones are quite warm and the overall image some of these look quite warm. And I think part of that is probably a symptom of the space you're in. But I would definitely check to make sure that your white balance is set correctly. And we want, everything to look as natural as possible. And sometimes we want a little bit of warmth, but not too much. So that's one thing that in this indoor setting, I suspect it just could have been a white balance issue, but I would take a look at that. Otherwise, it looks like you captured some beautiful moments here, which is always really tough at weddings. They're very stressful. You don't want to miss, the mom crying or the vows or that little look that the bride and groom shared between each other. So it's really, really tough. Yeah, it looks like all the family photos outside look great.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I'm just
these
gonna
are
go back to see a different example.
Cool. So it looks like these are all projects. So maybe let's look at some portrait
Okay.
ones. So photo
Yeah.
session number 32.
First of all, I want to know where this field is, and I want to be there, and I want to take photos there right this moment. That looks awesome.
That is a beautiful field.
Yeah, I've been looking into going to a lavender field or something like that while it's still summer and taking some photos. But gorgeous. I really do like the colors in these photos. They're very natural, but they're still very nice and warm. And yeah, overall I think the colors are great. The one thing I might suggest, sorry, go ahead.
Now, if we go back up top, I was going to say, overall, the colors look very consistent. I think you did a very great job on it. It looks, and I don't know how it might show up on your end, Lizzie, since you have the screen in front of you, but it looks like that right image, looks like maybe the white balance is a little, or it looks a little more green on the green side of things compared to some of the other ones.
It could be.
Yeah.
On my
So,
screen, it looks okay, but yeah, it could be. What I would say overall is you're doing a great job at trying to get some of those flowers in the foreground.
mhm.
But I would consider, especially with this one on the left, you have those two purple flowers on the left side. It would be great if you could try to mimic that on the right side too, just to frame your subject perfectly in the center of that frame. And sometimes it literally means grabbing some of those flowers and pulling them over. Or, I mean, you can do it in post if it was just a great photo and you really want to make it work, but that's harder to do than, you know, capturing it in camera on the moment. So I would keep that in mind. Just, you know, use what's around you to try and frame the photo and make it work for you, and try and create the photo that you want rather than sometimes just letting your environment dictate what kind of photo you're getting. And like in that right image, you pointed out like that one flower that's in front of her, it does add some depth, but to me, it looks a little bit distracting, and her expression is so beautiful. I don't want anything to pull away from, you know, that organic expression and look that she has. So I would say that that one is just a tiny bit distracting. So just being aware of all of those little things and taking the photo. That one's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's a beautiful shot. Yeah, I agree. Definitely have the elements work in your favor. I will say, especially out in nature, you definitely don't want to make any destructive things out there and kind of rip things out to make them work in your favor. You know, always practice leave no trace out there in the wilderness, but there's definitely all sorts of things that you can do to have the images work in your favor, whether it's kind of framing it, as Lizzie was saying. You can kind of get a little bit back and get some of those other flowers to work in your favor, but you definitely want to use all these elements. They're kind of the natural props in your shoot, so definitely use them to your advantage.
And shooting right into the sunlight in this left one is fantastic. You get some really gorgeous light there. The one thing I can tell is that the horizon line looks a tiny bit off in both of these, and it could also be the lens you were using. So maybe enabling profile corrections in Lightroom might correct some of that, because it looks like it's kind of like bending in the center, and you just want that flat level horizon. So that could easily fix that. Just little things that are that end up, you know, they're such great photos. You don't want to have something silly like the horizon line get in your way.
Yeah.
Great.
Beautiful work though. That's looking good. Cool. Let's look at maybe one or two more projects. Maybe I think I saw a photo there of some architecture, or maybe some of the travel ones.
This one here?
Yeah, that one or the one on the right?
This one on the right I really want to see, because it looks
let's check it out.
Right up my alley. It looks moody. It looks like a crappy weather day, which is my favorite time to shoot.
Yeah, don't let the weather discourage you. You can always make some awesome art from it, no matter the conditions.
The texture in the sky, if it had been raining, you get, like with this photo in particular, you get a little bit of reflection on the dock.
Yeah.
That's all stuff we want in photography. Overall, I like the edit on this photo. I can tell that you're definitely working with the blues that you probably got. Another thing you could try is maybe desaturating those blues and going full mood, but that's your personal preference. Your subject looks a little uncomfortable. He definitely looks cold.
Yes, he does. He looks cold and possibly wet.
Yeah, he looks cold and wet, which is probably exactly how he felt. But I mean, if you're trying to, my favorite thing in travel photography is trying to get a really effortless looking artistic travel photo, because I mean, anyone can take, and I mean, even professionals can take really beautiful landscapes, but it's adding in a subject or taking that photo in a different way that makes it look like art and makes it look a little bit different, and creating a feel and mood and vibe for that photo. And obviously, like, the weather is so interesting in this photo. The last thing I would want is your model or your subject here looking a little uncomfortable. It would be a lot more interesting if he was maybe doing a different pose or looked more natural or relaxed, or like he was really taking in the view, for example. Yeah, that would be my only feedback. Poor guy, though.
Doing it for the shot.
Doing it for...
There goes
Oh,
Zoom.
that's
Quitting on us
popping
once
back.
more.
Back.
Yeah, I still see you. Well, now we lost her. We lost your screen share, but now
That's
you're
okay.
book of our screen. Go ahead and share your screen one more
Yep.
time. Then we can get that back. There we go.
Oh, Zoom.
She's back.
Can't live
Cool.
with you, can't live without you.
Double-edged sword. All right, let's have a
Yes.
look at one more, and then maybe we can knock out an edit or two before we got to wrap up.
Yeah. So we've got it looks like a little bit of real estate. We've got a car. We've got this beautiful church castle looking place.
Yeah, let's look at the church castle one. It's
the
probably
church castle.
Church castle.
I like that. I love it. I want to see if I can find that one particular photo.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So you've got a little bit of lens flare coming off that building. So a fun tip for you guys, if you want to get a flare like that, there's a little rule of thumb called Sunny 16, so f16, so your aperture at 16. It'll help you get those spiky lens flares and shooting right into the sun. In case you're not aware.
Starburst. Yeah, you need
Yeah.
you need a high aperture.
That's a
for
better
that,
way
so.
of explaining it than I did. I'm like a little spiky sun flare.
A little
Okay.
sun flare.
This is great.
This looks great. Off the bat, I don't know if it looks like to you, but it does look a little skewed. I think
Yeah.
that horizon line maybe could be evened out a little bit.
Exactly. A
But
couple
besides
things when
that,
you're yeah, it's a great, like, I do like the colors. The only thing that's a bit tricky when taking photos like this is making sure I mean, we mentioned this when we were editing my photos, that you're shooting from the right angle and your horizon line is perfect. So you want your perspective to be totally in line. And when you're shooting something like this building that is very symmetrical, you want it to be directly in the center of the frame, and it seems like it's a little bit off to the left. I think it looks like you're a little bit standing right in that pathway. So maybe you would want to place yourself in the center of that pathway, and the horizon line you could correct. And with photos like these, I mean, this is a great photo. I'm not sure what lens you shot it with, but it is fun to shoot these with a longer lens because it really brings an object that's far in the distance closer to you.
yeah, great tip.
So, and it'll really give you that depth. If this is a long kind of pathway that you're on, it'll give you the depth of the trees and really narrow into your subject as well.
Yeah, I agree. Those are all great tips. And I think you did a great job too. And kind of, I don't know if you added any lighting to that, or sorry, any adjustments to that church to make it stand out. Looks like it could be just the lighting, but it definitely is the focal point of the picture of where we want our eyes to be. So job
Totally.
well done, my friend.
Very much so.
Cool.
And the
So
green and the warmth of the castle
Yeah.
and the blue sky. Colors look great.
it looks great. Awesome. So Nikita, thank you so much for submitting your portfolio. Everybody give her a follow, give her some kudos. She's got a lot of amazing work on here. So thank you so much for submitting. All right, so we have about 15 more minutes. Actually, maybe about 10 more. Do we want to maybe knock out one or two more edits, Lizzie?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
So we're back in Lightroom.
We're back in Lightroom.
So what shall we do? Why
Yeah,
don't
let us
we
know
do...
in the chat. Why don't we gauge the chat one more time? So
Yeah,
for this
let's
final
do it.
edit chat, let us know what photo you want Lizzie to edit. So why don't we show some options? So we have that mountain one. We have
I can actually make this a
canyon.
little bit bigger if you guys want to if you can see in the bottom of my screen. I'll
Yeah, so
scroll
we
along.
have mountains. We have canyon. We'll call this one canyon. The other one will be mountains.
Sure.
And
We've
then
got
maybe
another one
the
of our
portrait.
model.
Yeah, so canyons, mountains, or portrait. Let us know. And in the meantime, I'm going to give some love to the chat. Let's see. We had Christopher Sinkinson saying, "Hey, Lizzie, just took a double take and just watched you surprising Chris with his 100K award. So much talent in one city." Smiley face.
Oh yeah, that was so long ago now. That was like 2 years ago. Yeah, Peter McKinnon and I surprised Chris with his 100K plaque. Yeah, I think that was 2 years ago. And so we had a little party for him.
Oh,
And
how
that
fun.
was really fun. He was so surprised. I think he cried a little. You can kind of tell his voice cracked a little. He had no
The
idea
feels were
that we were all
true.
in there. But it's so easy. It's really easy to surprise Chris, I learned. He just doesn't question anything that you're doing.
All right, so I'm seeing the comments come in. There's an overwhelming amount of people saying portrait. So let's do another portrait shot.
Alrighty.
All right, so the
Okay.
chat has spoken, and we will do more portrait shots. So we have about 10 more minutes, so let's go ahead and see more portrait photography.
Okay, so this is my beautiful friend Joelle again. She also has a YouTube channel. And this was a space in Toronto that we rented. It was a studio space that had this very Moroccan vibe, which was kind of cool. So I'm gonna pull this the straighten tool, my ruler tool, and although you wouldn't necessarily notice, oh sorry about that, you wouldn't necessarily notice that the photo looks super off, but the like off like not level, but you can tell that this corner in the wall isn't straight. So I'm actually going to use that as our guide and straighten out the photo. That did a pretty good job.
Nice.
And that's better. So that's like, you want to do your big corrections first and kind of work your way down. That would be my advice. Okay, so let's go to our tone curve first. Bring up the highlights. It's always a good rule of thumb to start with a little S curve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember unlocking the curve tool, just learning how to do it, and that immediately made a difference in my photography. Just even adding that simple S curve. It's a big upgrade once you unlock that skill, so to say.
Absolutely. And I think it's really intimidating for everyone when they're starting out going, oh my gosh, like what is doing what here? What do I want to do? Yeah.
Agreed.
But it's start with an S curve and work your way up. So the trick here is with my classic little pulling up the blacks here, I don't want to lose all the detail in her hair. She's got dark hair. So that's where I'm noticing a lot of these adjustments are affecting my photo. You can bring that up later or bring up those shadows later with a localized adjustment, which might actually be what I end up doing. So that's making her skin look a little too orange. But overall, I was pretty happy with these photos right out of camera, so there won't be too many adjustments here.
This one was shot with your Sony a7 III?
Yes, exactly. Love the a7 III. It's a really great camera for both photos and video. And I actually heard the other day, I mean, it makes sense. I don't know why I didn't know this before, but it was Sony's like best-selling camera because it was just so multi-purpose.
Yeah, I know quite a bit of buddies that went down the Sony a7 III route. Its resolution is pretty gnarly.
Exactly. And I think it's everyone who has an a7 III now is looking at the a7S III going, oh, well, maybe I should, if you shoot video, maybe I should. And a lot of people are, on second thought, maybe I'll give that a try. And a little bit, I mean, the megapixels, a lot of people are concerned about. But really, again, it just depends where your photo is going.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think people can get kind of lost in the tech specs of cameras. The megapixels that the a7 III has, it's a lot. And, you know, you do kind of want to look at that if you're printing these photos on billboards or just gigantic things. But, you know, a lot of times you don't need that many pixels. Yeah, a lot of times you don't need that many pixels if your output is going to be social media a lot. So, I mean, it helps to know what your output is going to be, because that can also kind of make you do a better educated decision in which type of camera you get. You know, that goes back to getting your feet dirty, baby steps, and then making more educated decisions on what type of camera it is you want to get.
Exactly. Like, I wouldn't necessarily, if this is your first camera, to jump right into that right away.
I agree.
I'm not sure you're going to get your use out of it, and then you might as well just save your cash and invest in lenses.
Yeah. Yeah, because it sounds like you and I started with the Canon T3i. That was my first camera. And then, you know, we got our hands dirty with it. And then I personally saw that I catered more towards stills. So then I bought a 5D3, which was a full frame camera.
That's exactly what I did.
Like had the same roadmap. Check that out.
Yeah, it's funny. I miss that camera a little bit.
Yeah, it's a tank. I do a lot of backpacking, and that still goes with me. And I'll add a solid like 8 pounds to my pack, which doesn't sound much, but when you're backpacking for just tons of miles, you will feel.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet. Did you ever think about upgrading to the 4?
I did, but then that was right around the time that the mirrorless, so to say, revolution was happening. So like the bodies of like the A7, or like now Canon's got the R line, Panasonic.
Right.
And honestly, I think my next big upgrade, I'm just going to want a lighter camera. I mean, the 5D is great. It's a tank. It's gone through so many storms and elements, and it still holds out strong. It really is a tank. But I think I'm going to want something lighter, you know, kind of shed that mirror and maybe go mirrorless just for the sake of weight.
Yep. Totally understand. I think that's what everyone wants right now is they want and I mean, people who are sitting with their professional camera, they're going, it would be great if we had something smaller and lighter that, you know, could do the same thing.
Yeah, we're still
or
getting
as close
there, you know?
to what I can get. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can't have it all with camera. You got to compromise on some things, but I'd say they're getting a little closer on there.
I would say so, for sure.
Cool. So what's going on with the edit? Where are we with it?
I think we've come a long way. I mean, it's some subtle adjustments. You might say that you don't really notice very much, but again, I kind of like the photo as is. I don't want to do, the lighting was already quite nice in the room. So I'm not going to do anything that major here. I might look at where, I think this is some of the yellows in the background, the orange. So maybe I'll bring up the luminance a little bit there.
It's looking good on that side-by-side view. We saw that you definitely made the subject, you made her more pop as compared to the other one. So it's looking good. And that was mainly, it seemed like with the curves, right?
Yeah, mainly with curves. It's a good place to start and do your major adjustments. And then I do some minor ones in the actual effects panel. And now, I might add a little bit of a makeshift vignette kind of. But yeah, with portraits, I don't like to do too much. Depends if I'm going for like a really vintage look, for example, then maybe I might go into split toning and, you know, add some green to the highlights or something, do something a little more dramatic. But I'm on the natural train right now and trying to keep all the colors and everything try to get a photo to look as best as I can, but keep all the colors and everything like a very natural look. So
awesome. Cornell saying, gotta go. See you, Lizzie, Paco, and chat friends. Thanks for joining us, Cornell. Tune in tomorrow if you can.
Hope to see you
Maida
there.
saying, love the dreamy feel of the photo. I agree. It's pretty dreamy.
Thank you. Thank you. Ethereal. That's my vibe. That's one of my favorite words.
It's a good
to
one.
describe something. Yep. Just emphasize your eyes a little bit.
And are we just using an exposure slider with a local brush to do that?
Exactly. And maybe bring up some of the shadows just a little bit. If you like, I mean, if this is We'll go into a bit more detail on this tomorrow, but something I like to do is you can see that kind of sparkle in her eyes from the window. Sometimes I'll go over that with a new brush. And I'll just click on each of those little, you can actually see it there, those little circles. And I'll bring up the exposure just to make that sparkle a little bit brighter. Makes her eyes look a little bit glossier.
Nice.
You know, that's actually a little bit intense, so we might fix that.
Awesome. That's looking great.
Overall, I'm pretty happy with
let's check
that.
out that before and after, and there we go. Cool. Well, with that edit, unfortunately, it is now time to wrap up. So, great job with all the editing, Lizzie. Let's go back to this shot of us two. Yes. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I think this has been an awesome stream. There's so many great questions in the chat. So much to learn. We got to see Lizzie editing. Don't go anywhere, though, because we still have a lot more to go. Let's pull up that schedule. So if you stick around, we're going to have the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge with the one and only Andrew Hawkrattle. He is so funny, so much energy. I love that guy. Stick around for Illustrator goodness. Then we have Branding and Identity with Molly Russell, followed by the Adobe XD Daily Creative Challenge, the Draw Along with Kyle Webster, and we're wrapping it up with the Design Off with Voodoo Val. All right, everybody. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. This was an awesome stream. There's so much chat engagement.
Where can everybody submit their photos for tomorrow?
That was in the chat with
is
Cody.
it? Okay, good.
I think she was linking to the Discord. So if the chat refreshes, Cody, go ahead and submit that one more time. Yeah, I believe it's the bit.ly for the Photoshop Discord. Actually, I think I have that right here. Check this out. Boom, there it is. So go ahead and submit your photos there, and then Lizzie will have a look at those. All right. Okay, everybody, we got to sign off. Stick around. We still got a lot more to go. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
See you.